Hi, this is Father Bill W. here in Austin, Texas. I want to welcome you to the podcast. I am an Episcopal priest in long-term recovery, coming up on 48 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and forever grateful to the many folks who helped me along the way on my own spiritual journey. We're very interested here in the process called two-way prayer. If you haven't visited our website, encourage you to do so. If you have, give us another several weeks, I guess. We're working on revising the website, bring it up to date a little bit more, and make it more interactive and post things that are happening on the website. So the website is Two-Way Prayer, and you can reach me at twowayprayer@gmail.com. The series we're into right now is titled Psychic Change in Recovery. We've been looking at different ways to approach psychic change, some studies that were done around it by Professor Miller out in Albuquerque, and of course going back to some of the classics, William James in his varieties of religious experience, that really center around this process. And I think it's tremendously important. And ultimately, it is really the journey of transformation, how to experience a deep inner shift in our consciousness. And if we listen to Jung and his advice to Roland, that's what he told him. You need to go and you have to experience a shift at the deepest levels of your consciousness, and one that's going to be strong enough to overcome addiction. So in this episode, I want to share with you a talk that I listened to recently. It's by a late Jungian analyst, psychologist. His name is Robert Moore. You might be familiar with him. He's written a number of books. But he delivered this talk at the Minnesota Men's Conference that Robert Bly sponsors. Bly is a poet. He's been very active in the men's movement. Quite a character, quite a deeply spiritual man, and he hosts this conference. They recorded any number of them over the years. Don't know if it's still going on, but this was the talk that he gave on the 7 elements of spiritual transformation. So if you want to listen to it, just go to YouTube, look up Robert Moore, put in transformation, and the talk should come up. Moore introduces the 7-step process. It's not a linear process. It's not like I do 1, 2, 3, and off I go. It's more spiral in its design, but it's good. I think it's really good. It's got some good information that kind of lays down some markers on the way of transformation. Interestingly, the way is one of the titles that they wanted to give to the big book that became Alcoholics Anonymous. They were going to title it The Way. And unfortunately for AA, or fortunately, there were too many books with that title, so they searched around for another. But the 12 steps actually are, in effect, a way. They are a path to a very specific destination. And that destination is a psychic change. That's what they are there to do. It's as a result of that we carried the message. But it's not just carrying the message. It's that as a result of these steps, something shifted deep inside of us, just like Jung wanted to have for Roland. So, I'm working on a book on the history of the 12 steps, and I haven't gotten terribly far, but I do have the first sentence, and that is this. Basically says that, there's an old Chinese saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. But if that first step is pointed in the wrong direction, God only knows where the hell we're going to wind up. So I think it's really important to keep our eye on step 12. When we're beginning with one, that is the destination. That is the whole purpose. And so I'm not a great believer in worshiping the steps or that sort of thing. I'm a believer in let's get through them as quickly and as deeply as possible so that we can experience that psychic change that awaits us at the end. So enough of an introduction. Let's start going through Moore's 7 points or elements to this transformation. So his first one, he says, is it begins with a vision. That if one is going to be transformed, one needs some sort of a vision in order to begin. A vision, in this case, of what transformation might look like. It doesn't have to be perfect. It may not even be correct, but it has to be there. And it needs to be something more than I have right now. And usually the thing that we're lacking, we can maybe first spot it in others. And when we see it, we know that that's what we've been looking for. We can't see it in ourselves. We can't find that place within ourselves, not in the beginning, but we can see it in others. Bill Wilson saw it in Ebby, his friend Ebby, when he came to visit him. And Ebby had what did he have? 2 months, 60 days. Yeah, 60 days sober. And he comes and he visits Wilson. And Wilson could see that he has what he needed and he wanted it. And that began the vision for Bill Wilson. And he shifted. He said he came carrying hope in one hand and the message of hopelessness in the other. He had found a way out from his cave. It's a beautiful description that Wilson gives of this whole process, that he's chained up in a cave. His family's out there encouraging him to come out, but he can't because he's chained. And yet Ebby, because he is an alcoholic, was able to enter Wilson's cave and show him the way out. Dr. Bob saw the same thing in Bill. Here was a man who, again, at only 5 months or so sober, was able to carry the message of freedom that he had found a way out. And Dr. Bob had been desperately searching for that way. So this is what recovery is about. We see it in someone else. It's a program of attraction. That's the vision. So what is the vision for us in recovery? In the big book, we actually spell it out. It's called a vision for you. Okay? It's a vision for you. And where we start is we're living in hell. And then one day we get a glimpse of heaven. That's the vision, that what has happened to these 100 individuals can also happen to us. And so we latch on to that vision. It starts off with the 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. That's where the journey begins. But if I endure with the vision, it takes me to another land, to another place. And that chapter ends with, come join us on this road, the road of happy destiny, and we'll be there with you. If you look at it historically, it's the description of a vision quest, that where someone goes in search of spiritual transformation. And almost every culture, except our own, has had these, where the young men in particular were sent off in search of a vision, came back with another name in many cases, came back as men, came back leaving boyhood behind and able to join the tribe at a more mature level. That's the journey. So I encourage people when they're starting off on this 12-step vision quest, please keep step 12 firmly in mind, because that's where we're going. Um, how does it begin for us? What is the change process for us? Well, I think it's really the first three steps. It's I can't, the experience of the powerlessness. Uh, it's God. If there is a God, if there is something or someone at the other end of this dark tunnel, then God could do for us what we can't do for ourselves. And then three is where I commit to taking the journey in the presence of another being, another human being. We get down on our knees, and that's the way the pioneers did it, and say, God help me, God help me. It's pretty simple, and I really believe in trying to keep these steps simple. Dr. Bob got those three steps out of the way in maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and encouraged us to do that. Don't louse this thing up, Bill, he said, with a lot of Freudian stuff. Keep it simple. So I think Moore is following in that tradition. His second element of what's needed. So first you have a vision. What's second? He says we need a diagnosis of what's wrong with us. What is it that's keeping us from arriving at that transformed place inside? What is it that's stunting my growth? What is it that's slowing me down? What is it that's blocking me? And that's an important word, blocking me. Bookman used to say, the founder of the Oxford group from which AA emerged, he used to say, I work with constipated Christians. I really like that phrase, that he worked with people who had a blockage of some sort. And his role was to provide them help that was going to eliminate that blockage. And so most of the work in the beginning of the spiritual quest is focused quite squarely on what is it that's wrong with me, inside of me? What is it that's blocking me? Excuse me, blocking me from God. And if you look at it that way, then steps 4 through 9, half of the 12 steps, are really all about removing the blockages that keep me from God, the blockages that keep me from my true self, the blockages that keep me from this psychic change. What are they? Well, in 4, we look at them. We do that searching and fearless moral inventory. In 5, we share it. In 6 and 7, in the old days, you would have been introduced to the 4 absolutes: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. That these are the standards by which we're going to look at ourselves, look at our thoughts, look at our actions, and begin to live by. Is this what I'm about to do honest? Is it unselfish? Is it loving? Is it pure? We ask ourselves those questions. 8 and 9, we make amends for where we have harmed other people. So his question then is, all right, for this phase, what is it that's needed? And his answer is the third element. And he says, you need courage. Many of us are going to want to turn back. Many of the people who I find who have relapsed in the program, I ask them, did you really ever do an honest to God 4th and 5th step? And the great majority of them will say, no, I didn't. I held something back. Well, if you're going to hold it back, you're gonna cripple yourself on your journey. So courage is what's needed, and I had kind of had the image of the explorers back in the 1500s or so, setting off to explore the world, Magellan and Columbus and all those guys. And what was their fear? Their fear was that if they go too far out to sea, they're going to fall off the ends of the earth. So they're facing the unknown, facing the stuff inside of us that we don't want to look at. That's why the courage is so important. I've said on occasion, if in addition to the four absolutes, if I could add one more to the absolutes, that is what it would be: is courage, because that's what it takes to go through this journey of transformation. And the ones who make it to the other end, they're not always the smart ones. As a matter of fact, too smart can really be a problem for this spiritual work. But it is the courageous ones. It's the ones who don't give up. It's the ones who stay the course. They are the ones in the end who make it. His fourth element, he says, you need energy. It's kind of a surprise one. But he says, if you don't have energy, you're not going to find the courage. So there has to be a connection to something that is life-giving. And I want to say this, for God's sakes, don't wait to get to the 11th step and the 12th step before you introduce people to this. Introduce them to prayer and to God and to having Him show you the way right from the beginning, because that is the energy source. See, you need to be in touch with the fire. So how do we find this energy? Well, we're going to find it inside. We will draw some from one another, but ultimately it's going to come from within. God, someone described Him as 100,000 watts of energy, volts of energy, whatever. I'm not very technically inclined, but He is power. Lack of power is our dilemma. So we have to be in touch with that power, in conscious connection with that power. And it is that power that does the healing and the transformation through us. Jung said something important. He said, all healing comes through the numinous, the sacred. He said, if you are a believing Christian, he said, I can't really help you. I'm here for the ones who don't have that kind of faith. If you have it, I can't do it better than Jesus. So, if we will connect with that source, that is how we're going to effect the deep change that needs to come about. And it's easier than I think we make it out to be. I remember I was a treatment director for many, many years, and I had a kid. When somebody got in trouble, they usually sent him to the office, and I was like the principal. This kid was saying, "I just can't get this program. I don't really believe in God." And we began to kind of explore that there. And when we got down to it, he could relate to, well, can you believe in something? We said, well, yeah, maybe it's something like the Force from the Star Wars movie. And I said, that's fine. Actually, that's closer to what you need to be in touch with than some God sitting up in the sky on a cloud. That's not very realistic. Can you build a relationship with that force? Can you know when that force is with you, as the movie says, or when the force is withdrawn? That's a beautiful, beautiful image for finding this center. And the center is actually inside of me. It's my birthright. It's who I am. The big book says what? The great reality is within. Well, how do we tap into that great reality? We create a relationship with it. And that's really what two-way prayer is all about, is finding that relationship so that I can become the individual that I am meant to be, which is not a drunk and it's not a drug addict. It is to be a child of God. It is to find that my own inner worth, my inner gold. And that gold has energy, tremendous, tremendous energy inside of it. The fifth element that Moore identifies, he says, is faith or trust. And he says either you have it or you don't. And and it's moment to moment. I'm glad he makes this point. It isn't, and it's not I believe this and I believe that. It's nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with my relationship with this other. Am I trusting it? Am I allowing it or him or her uh, to 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 manifest in my life through me? It's not about beliefs. And he uses an interesting phrase. He says, faith means, in fact, you're hooked up to something that mediates juice. Interesting word, juice. Um, well, it's accurate. Is the juice flowing? And I really have to keep my eye on that. Am I rightly related to that something that is bigger than myself? Is my small ego self rightly related, properly connected to its source? He says it's phenomenological and it's experienced. It's a phenomenon. You have it. You have it. You don't get there through your mind. You get there through an experience of this thing, and you can take your spiritual pulse. And I do this in my quiet times each morning. Um, am I connected or am I not connected? And so often I am not connected. So often during the day I am not connected. All right, and it makes a huge difference whether the juice is flowing or if it's not. And we have this saying, well, I'm restless, irritable, and discontented. Well, I don't think those are bad things. I don't look at them that way anyway. They tell me whether I'm connected or not, whether I'm consciously in contact. Because if I'm not, then the juice goes away. The battery starts to go down. Whatever analogy you want to use, hey. So there's an inner force that's inside of me, and he puts it nicely. He said, something that's pulling you together against the forces that would pull you apart. See, we've got both. We've got this force inside of us that is pulling us together, and that's the God part. That's what we call it. And there's a part that is also wanting my own destruction. So this faith business, it's not a question of do you have it or do you not. It's much more a question of how powerful is your faith? Is what I'm hooked up to able to do for me what I can't do for myself? Am I actively cooperating with it? And so we're on a continuum. And some days I have more faith and more trust than I have in other days. And that's just the way it is. But am I being pulled together so that I can now step into my life as fully as I can? Can I, to borrow the expression that unfortunately the Army stole it, can you be all that you are meant to be? I mean, that's the question to really ask ourselves, you know? And he makes the point that there is an enemy to this process, and it is despair. It's giving up. And it's when faith is low, despair is rising. These things are equal. It's an algebraic formula you can use. When faith is low, despair is rising. And he describes despair like a melanoma. It's a cancer. It's aggressive. And he says, if you notice despair, and it will come, attend to your faith as soon as possible. That there's a finite period of time, but it will take you down if we don't, eh? And it's not, what I've noticed is it's not the problems. The problems we face in recovery can be huge. People face tremendous problems. It's the complacency that gets us. It's the relying on self. It's the withdrawal from our conscious contact with God that does it. Number 6, what is it? Sacrifice. It says our ancestors knew it. They were in touch with it. And it's always a part of any authentic spiritual transformation. And Moore was an anthropologist. He studied the different tribes, eh? And each one had some form of sacrifice. And what was it that our ancestors knew? He put it like this. He says, there is something great. It wants something from me. If I want the resources I need for life, if I offer it what it wants, then maybe it will return to me what I need to live. Now that's kind of primitive, but it's really still the same thing. If I cooperate with God's grace, then God's grace operates through me. If I am drinking the God juice, the God juice is going to manifest in my life. Eh? And he says this can be conscious or unconscious, this sacrifice, but it has to be there. And it's not magic and it's not sorcery. The other is not compelled to do it. But my responsibility, he says, is to make the very best offering that I can. And what is that? That's my life and my will. That I'm turning my life and my will over to God on a daily and deeper basis. He says, I'm not in charge of outcomes. Well, that's right. You see? And this is the place where I think the quiet time with God is so very, very important. So I watch myself. I watch my ego. This is step 10. And then I pray. I ask God for help as I do what? Sacrifice my life and my will over to him. And then I receive the guidance and I receive the energy to do it. And I get up and I go. Can't tell you how many times I've sat down in morning prayer and meditation, feeling despondent, despair. And I get up. If I've done it right and I've connected right, I can feel the power of the juice coming right through me. Frank Amos, who studied AA in the early days, said this prayer and meditation was actually more important than the meetings we go to. I mean, you get a little charge from the meetings, I know that. But in the beginning, it was the prayer and meditation that really brought about the transformation. What's the final one? It's communion. He says, if sacrifice is done consciously, it is possible to enter into a great communion with this other, where there is a flow between God and me. Then you'll not have an energy shortage. You'll not have an increase in despair. You're connected. And then there comes about this psychic change. And what is it? It's joining with the life force. And there's a radiance, an illumination that's often accompanied. People can see it in us. You're changing, eh? He tells the story of the feeding of the 5,000, and he kind of ends up with this, and so will I. He says, this is Jesus, he says the people were hungry, and they come to Jesus, the disciples come and say, hey, they're hungry, there's thousands of them, what are we going to do? He says, you feed them. He says, we can't. So we don't have anything. They had no vision. Jesus had vision. Jesus had connection. So, and this is not magic. So he says, what do we have? So we have a young boy here who has 5 loaves and 2 fish. He says, bring them to me. Bring them to me. And what does he do? They bring them, and he blesses them, and he breaks them, and he gives them. And there's the sacred ritual. Bring, bless, break, give. And suddenly what? There is enough. And that's what happens when we bring our imperfect offering to the great one. We bring our imperfect ego, our imperfect lives, and it is given back to us. How? Transformed. Transformation isn't just, the white light that Wilson saw in the detox. That's nice if it happens, but don't pay too much attention to it. This is Meister Eckhart, the medieval mystic. He says, if when meditating, you ever enter a state so blissful that you would choose to remain there forever, tear yourself free as quickly as you can and seize on the task next at hand, for these are melting sensations and nothing else. And so this communion with the absolute, with the other, with the entity person we call God, this is where it's at. That we have conscious contact, that we have conscious connection, and then that God manifests himself or herself or itself through us. How? In love and service. That's the transformation. That's the thing that we are looking for in this 12-step process. So hope some of this stuff was interesting and helpful for you on your own journey. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a word. God bless and keep coming back.